Hola, me llamo José y voy a presentarles mi tema que trata sobre el ex líder cubano Fidel Castro. El idioma de la presentación es inglés. Bienvenidos. Fidel Castro was born on August 13th, 1926 in southeast Cuba. His father was an immigrant from Spain named Angel Castro Arriguez. Castro was baptized and raised Catholic and even studied in Catholic schools. He went to Roman Catholic boarding school in Santiago and Catholic high school Belen in Havana, where he proved an accomplished athlete in which he excelled in track and field events such as high jump and middle distance running. And he also played basketball, baseball, and tennis ball, and was named Havana's outstanding school boy sportsman in 1943 to 1944. In his youth life, he entered the School of Law of University of Havana in 1945, and his main activity at the university was politics. In 1947, he joined an abortive attempt by Dominican exiles, which included Juan Bosch, who would then become first democratically elected president of Dominican Republic, in an attempt to invade and overthrow an oppressive dictator, General Rafael Trujillo. His early adulthood life, in 1948, Fidel Castro married his first wife, Mirta Francisca de la Perdida Diaz, who was born on 30th September 1928 and died on 6th July 2024. In 1949, they had a son, Fidel Angel Castro Diaz Balart, who was also famously known as Little Fidel or Fidelito. And he became a Cuban nuclear scientist and government official, but died in 2018. In 1955, Castro divorced Mirta Francisca, and in 1980, he married his mistress, Delia Soto del Valle. Together, they had seven children, and it is said Castro had more than 15 children out of wedlock. And in 1993, one of his daughters from outside wedlock, Alina Fernandez Revuelta, a Cuban anti-communist activist, sought asylum in US and openly criticized her father's rule, calling him a torturer, a drug smuggler, and a terrorist. Why was Castro powerful? Well, we all know Cuba attained international prominence under Fidel Castro rule. And reasons were because he transformed Cuba into a communist state in the Western Hemisphere. He put Cuba onto the world stage by provoking Cold War confrontation and defying the United States. His fans saw him as a champion of socialism and anti-imperialism. His revolutionary influence was felt far beyond Cuba, and he secured Cuba's independence. And under his administration, Cuba became a one-party communist state. He stood up to the United States and got away with it. And in 1960, he released a flood of 125,000 immigrants, including criminals, into the United States. And his youth life was grooming him, as his life was filled with a string of events. He took part in the urban riots that broke out in Bogota, Colombia in April 1948, and he tried to topple his predecessor, Batista, a number of times. He was the longest-serving non-royal head of state in the 20th and 21st century. For his career, after graduation in 1950, Castro began practicing law and became a member of the reformist Cuban People's Party called Ortodoxos. and also became a candidate for a seat in the House of Representatives in the elections scheduled for June 1952. But apparently, a former president and general, Fulgencio Batista, overthrew the government of the then President Carlos Manuel Prio Socarras, and Batista had lost the previous elections and did not see himself winning this time around. So he resorted to toppling the government and canceling the elections. So Fidel Castro's legal means failed to dislodge Batista, and he resorted to organizing a rebel force. And on the July 26, 1958, he led an attack in hopes of sparking uprising. The coup failed, and him, together with his brother Raul, got in prison for 15 years. And in 1955, they were released in a political amnesty and fled to Mexico. So how did he come to power then? And while in Mexico, Castro organized Cuban exilees into a revolutionary group called 26th of July Movement. And on December 2nd, 1956, Castro and his army of 81 men launched and landed on the eastern coast of Cuba. Many were killed, as some got captured, and Fidel, with his brother amongst other fighters, retreated into Sierra Maestra to wage guerrilla warfare. With the help of growing numbers of revolutionary volunteers, Castro's forces won a string of victories, particularly because of his propaganda, which proved effective as international support for Batista decreased. Government military defeats also multiplied, and Batista fled the country on January 1st, 1959. Castro and his 800 guerrilla fighters had defeated the Cuban government's 30,000-man professional army. He became commander-in-chief of the armed forces, with Manuel Urrutia as the president. The rise to power was that in February 1959, Castro became premier, and thus he was the head of the government. Urrutia was forced to resign in July 1959, and Castro had come to power with the support of most Cuban city dwellers, based on his promises to restore the 1940 Constitution, create a honest administration, reinstate full civil and political liberties, and undertake moderate reforms. So these were the promises what he had made to his people, but they helped him come to power. But the aftermaths were such that Castro began pursuing more radical policies. Cuba's private commerce and industry were nationalized, sweeping land reforms were instituted, and American businesses and agricultural estates were sized up. And in February 1960, Castro made a trade agreement with the Soviet Union, which saw the US break off diplomatic relations the following year. And US secretly equipped thousands of Cuban exilees to overthrow Castro's government. Cuba also began acquiring weapons from Soviet Union, and in 1962, Soviet Union secretly stationed ballistic missiles in Cuba. World came close to nuclear war. A one-party government was implemented to exercise dictatorial control over all aspects in Cuba, and all oppositions were ruthlessly suppressed. So, how was Castro reign? Well, With the creation of new constitution and the National Assembly in 1979, Castro became president of the State Council and retained posts of premier, commander-in-chief of armed forces, and secretary general of the Communist Party. He continued to exercise unquestioned and total control over the government, with his brother Raul Castro as the minister of the armed forces, ranked second to him. Castro's early attempts to foment Marxist revolutions elsewhere in Latin America failed, but his Cuban troops played an important role in various conflicts in other less developed countries, especially in Africa, where he sent 15,000 soldiers to support Ethiopia in its war with Somalia, the Ogaden War. He also took part in the Angolan Civil War and also in the US invasion of Grenada. He survived Bazaar assassination plots, and his government constant challenging Washington brought on decades of withering sanctions and diplomatic freeze. Castro had many mistresses, and including a German double agent who was involved in an assassination attempt by the CIA in 1960, where she had received poison pills that she was to put in Castro's food, but instead she never delivered the pills, but told Castro about the plot, claiming she still loved him. And also later testified about the John F. Kennedy assassination, stating she was involved with a group of anti-Cuban militias. Well, his legacy with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 also saw subsidies in Cuba come to an end. Economic situation worsened as authorities resorted to repression to maintain control. His last years were spent quietly as his brother Raul took helm and launched reforms in an effort to steer Cuba out of poverty, of which in 2015 he restored diplomatic relations with the United States after a half-century breach. Castro remained married to his wife, Dalia Soto, until his death on November 26, 2016, at the age of 90 years old. Well, thank you very much for listening. In case you want to learn more about Castro's biography or life, please feel free to visit the links I've written down there, and there you can learn more about it. Thank you.